The so-called Israeli-Palestinian peace talks stalled indefinitely, and the American influence in the Middle East seriously in doubt, a new player has stepped out into the fore, the European Union. But instead of being an honest broker and supporting the human rights of everyone involved, analysts say the EU has taken a decidedly pro-Israel stance.
Europe has become so close to Israel that it's, as I said, become effectively complicit in the occupation. And obviously, our politicians want to give the impression that what they're doing is furthering the so-called peace process, and that's the argument that they use time and time again. But the reality is that it's actually probably having the opposite effect.
The European Union is today the second largest market for Israeli export goods in the world, behind the United States. In 2009, trade between the two totaled approximately 20.2 billion euros. Israel is considered a privileged neighbor of the EU, and in an effort to deepen ties to the 27 European member states, Israel signed the EU-Israel Cooperation Agreement in June 2000.
Article 2 of that agreement makes clear that both sides have to respect basic fundamental human rights. Over the past decade, there's been any number of human rights abuses committed by the state of Israel against the Palestinian people, against the people of Lebanon, against people from Turkey, for example, last year when the Gaza Freedom Flotilla was attacked and 9 peace activists were murdered in international waters. Despite of all those abuses, the European Union is refusing to invoke that clause and refusing to take any serious action against Israel.
Cronin says that Israel also benefits from strong ties in matters of security and research and development, and that leading Israeli arms manufacturers profit directly from EU funding.
The Israeli companies that are drawing down money from the European Union in the form of science grants are arms manufacturers, companies like Elbit and Israel Aerospace Industries, the companies that have made the pilotless drones, or unmanned aerial vehicles, as they're also known, that were used to terrorize the people of Gaza in 2000 during Operation Cast Lead in 2008 and 2009. As a taxpayer, I find it objectionable. I find it disgusting that the European Union, that the tax that European Union citizens pay is going to subsidize companies like this and to subsidize the war industry in Israel.
A new report called The EU and the Palestinian Arab Minority in Israel has also called on the European Union to be more active in protecting the rights of Palestinian citizens of Israel, who make up 20% of the population. The report was released earlier this month by the Arab Association for Human Rights, Adalah, the Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel, and the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Network. Panelists presenting the report this week in Tel Aviv argued that the EU has an obligation to pressure Israel to respect the human rights of Palestinian citizens of the state.
But as the whole Oslo process and peace process has collapsed, we see that the Israeli government has been treating Arabs in Israel more and more as a security and demographic threat to the state, and all of these negative links and imposing very severe restrictions on the citizenship rights of Arabs in Israel, and speaking all the time about recognizing Israel as a Jewish state and the implications of that for Arabs in Israel, and speaking all the time more and more in the mainstream about population transfer, revocation of citizenship. We never saw that here before, that this is part of becoming more and more part of a mainstream discourse, makes Arabs in Israel feel that their existence in the state is threatened, that their citizenship rights are at risk, and could potentially create a situation very much of instability internally.
According to Jabarin, if the EU doesn't act to ensure that citizenship rights are protected, an uprising from within the Palestinian community in Israel is possible.
given the extreme deterioration in the human rights situation of Palestinians in Israel, that we say the EU must take these political commitments very seriously. And now it's time to take it seriously, or else you see Tunisia, you see Egypt, this is where everybody's headed.